So when I'm working with my students, I often find myself saying to them at the beginning, keep your pencil down when you're sketching. And they ask me, what do you mean by that? And why should I keep my pencil down when I'm sketching? And what I mean by it is exactly what I'm doing here. You can see this is an extremely messy looking piece of sketching. I'm scarcely lifting my pencil off the paper half the time. Sometimes I almost zigzag from one body part to another, doing these wild scrawling movements on the paper. And then the opposite of keeping your pencil down is what I'm doing here, which, as you can see, is ending up with a much smoother, less chaotic looking production, although it's still very rough and not polished at all, but it just doesn't have as many lines on the page. And when I finish this teddy, we'll go and have a look at how these two feel quite different once they're done, and why the difference in how they feel is the important thing about keeping your pencil down when you're sketching. So there we have a much neater looking teddy on the right hand side and a chaotic one on the left. And the chaotic one actually looks much more lively than its more static counterpart on the right. And the reason for that is simply because there are more lines on the paper. When you have all sorts of wild scrawling lines on the paper, it ignites your imagination in a way that a neat drawing doesn't. You see, when you only have one line on the paper, there's no room for your mind to get busy and start thinking about what isn't there. There's nothing implied. There's nothing for your imagination to work with. But when you have lots of lines, you start to introduce an asymmetry into your drawing, which is interesting. You start to introduce the possibility of movement, and suddenly your drawing just has more options of coming to life. It has possibilities, and that is incredibly important when you start creating. You want your mind to be seizing possibilities. So let's take a look at some of these very sketchy, keep your pencil down people that I've created here. A little boy, a little girl hopping along, and then there's this tiny little person sitting here and standing here, walking away. So there you have it. That is exactly why I say to my students, keep your pencil down when you're sketching. Whether you are working from a reference or whether you're creating something entirely out of your own head, your imagination is the most powerful tool that you have at your disposal. And putting a whole lot of lines on paper and implying a whole lot of movement or possibilities is the best fodder that you can give it. Still here? Great, because so am I. And here is one final tip for you about these teddies. Let's talk a little bit about the ground line. Now, as you can see, there's a ground line that seems to be cutting the bottom of the teddy's feet off. What's with that, and why put it in at all? Take a look at what happens when we have no ground line. Those teddies look a bit like they're going to float away, something like Mary Poppins. But when we put the ground line in, it anchors them. The only thing is, if we put it under their feet, it takes away the sense of depth. Whereas when we put it slightly through the bottom of them and then rub it out so that it doesn't cut bits of them off, it adds some depth to our sketch. That's our final tip. Did you like this video? Because I sure enjoyed making it. Please give it a thumbs up on YouTube, and of course subscribe to my channel. And if you'd like even more tips, things that I only share on email, head on over to my website www.alisonbeere.com and sign up there for email updates. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.